Good morning. Welcome to the Historical Network Research in Chinese Studies virtual conference. My name is Chen. I'm an associate professor of Chinese history at Bucknell University. My co-organizer of the conference, Henrike Rudolph, is an assistant professor of Chinese history at University of Göttingen, Germany. It's a great honor to invite you to this conversation about networks analysis in Chinese history. Historical network research is a nascent field in Chinese studies, but it's a field full of vitality. That vitality is nowhere more manifest than right here. Several hundred people registered for each day of the conference. Many of our presenters and conference attendees are junior scholars whose research interest shows the great potential of this field. So we are a group of people who are literally from all over the world. We have people who registered for the conference from mainland China, Taiwan, Hong Kong, Singapore, South Korea, Japan, India, Canada, United States, Germany, France, Italy, United Kingdom, Switzerland, the Netherlands, and so on and on. So this conference is not possible without this interest. And with this conference, we want to see this interest grow. We see this conference as a forum for sharing the most recent scholarship in Chinese history that uses network analysis. We want this conference to stimulate more discussion about the scholarship. We want to promote interdisciplinary dialogue between historians and network scholars in other fields, such as sociology, computer science, and so on. We also want this conference to be an opportunity for us to promote dialogue between network scholars who work on China and those who work on other world regions. Most of the research papers on digital projects that will be presented here at this conference in the next few days will appear in two special journal issues, both of which will be published later this year. One is the special issue that Henrike and I have been co-editing for the Journal of Historical Network Research, and the other is a special issue for the China-based bilingual Journal of Digital Humanities, 数字人文, which I've been co-editing with Dr. Zhao Wei from the Chinese Academy of Social Sciences. You will find the full papers for many of the presentations in these two special issues. Now, at the start of this conference, I would like to make a few quick statements about our methodological position. I hope the meaning of these statements will become clearer during the next few days of the conference. Years ago, when I was a graduate student, I told people I was studying networks in Chinese history. And the typical response I got was, you're studying Guanxi. Well, yes and no. I do study Guanxi, but the term Guanxi often implies a particular view of the Chinese society. The view sees the Chinese society as operating on the basis of informal connections and thus fundamentally different from Western societies that operate on the basis of formal institutions. We think this is an Orientalist view, and we do not take this view. That is to say, we do not take the view that informal connections or guanxi are by any means a unique cultural feature of the Chinese society. We believe instead that guanxi is nothing more than what we call connections, relationships, or personal ties in English. They exist in all human societies, past or present. Third, guanxi, that is relationships or connections, we believe, are not by themselves or in themselves networks. Relationships only become networks when they are aggregated and conceptualized as a totality that is presumed to possess identifiable and describable cultural characteristics. So the network is, in this sense, an analytical construct. Although human thinking has always been relational, the analytical exploration of networks is a modern cultural technique. Historical actors may have perceived the crisscrossing social relationships in a holistic way, but they usually denied these relationships existed any structural features that can be clearly described. And instead, we see in historical texts, we see people using words like pan跟错节, for example. They compare networks to the root systems of plants. implying that you're so complicated and so intertwined, they're so entwined that they could not be clearly described. We believe instead that relationships constitute networks that have structural properties that can be analyzed. They may have a core periphery structure. The nodes in the network may be clustered in certain ways, and so on and so forth. So papers at this conference seek to describe and explain the structural features and the structural properties of the networks in Chinese history. Tools and databases shared at this conference are intended to assist these explorations. Now I'll give I'll turn to my co-organizer Henrike to describe the sessions and the content of this conference.
Yes, from me also a warm welcome. And I think this conference really reflects the broad approach that Sung already mentioned, that we have also taken in the special issues. And the conference consists of 3 types of sessions. We have the paper panels, which showcases research of Chinese history that uses formal network analysis. We have project presentations focusing on databases and web platforms for network analysis and visualization. And we have hands-on workshops really focusing on the question of how to, with a focus on tools and data sets that are used in the research that you'll hear more about in the coming days. And we have workshops for beginners and more advanced scholars, and we obviously also encourage everyone to still participate in the advanced workshops, simply to see what is possible at the moment and where the roads may take you. And thus the conference offers a good overview of the state of the field. It becomes evident that network research holds both a critical empirical and imaginative explorative potential. What we mean with that is that we can readdress our knowledge of history. We can, for example, ask, what do we know about social relations of past elites and how do we know it? And critically engage with our knowledge in this way. This becomes apparent, for example, in the scholarship of Professor Peter Bohl on kinship networks that we'll hear more about, and Marilyn Levine's work on revolutionary leaders of the communist revolution. And imaginative, explorative means that we can also explore sources in a new way that was previously not possible, and in a way that we are explorers and do not know what lies at the end of our journey. So our insights might even differ from what historical actors perceive themselves as networks and how they're embedded in networks. For example, when we look at career paths of Southern Sung officials as presented by Xiong Huilan, or the intellectual history and the co-occurrence of nation-building terms in the writings of Chen Luxiu and Lang Qichao as presented by Chao and others. So we also see a comparative potential here, because the observed structural features can actually be compared across times and cultures. So we could, for example, compare aristocratic or Buddhist networks in different periods or even cultures, such as the work by Shang Wenyi and Markus Bingenheimer shows. And Markus Bingenheimer is even showing that network approaches can also help us to understand longue durées, because his data set is actually spanning over 1,700 years. And last but not least, what is another very interesting avenue is that we can enrich our source bodies, because now we can actually even make use of new sources that are not the outcome of scholarly research, but of community efforts such as Wikipedia, Wikidata, Baidu, and so forth. And even though they're not scholarly resources, we should still engage with them in a meaningful way if possible. Of course, exemplified by the work, for example, that you also see by Blouin and others in the special issues. And now let's come to the databases and tools, because we can, of course, here only showcase a small number of databases and tools. These are only examples, but already from the many names and many acronyms you can see, the field is burgeoning. More people coming in, of course. Everything started with the CBDB, and it's still the largest biographical database. But now we also have a new database in the making on modern China. We have specialized databases such as the China Historical Christian Database. We have more digitized source materials at our disposal. We already mentioned the tools. Many of them, fortunately, are open source, and you'll learn more about them and the programming language and the visualization platforms in the workshops. And of course, this is only possible because we have kind of try to reach out so much in recent years beyond our own field and worked closely with computer linguists, computer scientists, and so forth. So we can see this whole network analysis approach is interdisciplinary per se. And now finally, a few words of housekeeping, just to explain to you how this conference will work. We have panels where every speaker will speak for 10 minutes, followed immediately by a Q&A session for another 10 minutes. We have questions and comments, of course, but we disabled the raise hand function. You might have seen that we have a great number of participants today and also in the next days. So we would ask you to ask your questions in the Q&A window that you find at the bottom of your screen here in Zoom. And we will then collect the questions. And during the workshops, you will, of course, also be able to raise questions. We will collect them and answer them within specific Q&A breaks. Conference materials, you should have received an email. If you didn't, please check your spam folder with the links to online folders where you can find the project links, the software links, where you can also find the presentations, etc. As you probably already saw, this meeting is recorded. However, we will kind of edit it. So we will save keynote speeches, workshops, and project presentations so people can actually use it for teaching purposes later as well. But the audience is edited out, of course, to keep your anonymity, if you like. And speaking of anonymous participation, you can always raise questions in the chat box, as I said, but you don't have to use your proper name. However, if you would like to use your proper name, then please also change your Zoom name to your proper name and affiliation. And then when we don't have time to answer all the questions, maybe presenters can still reach out to you to follow up on your questions. And now let me come to special things, because of course this conference wouldn't have been possible without all the support we got in these past weeks. First of all, we have to thank, of course, our institutions, the Bucknell University and the Georg-August-Universität Göttingen. But of course, this whole conference wouldn't have been possible without the support of the Fairbank Center. And here I would like to especially thank Deng Guoliang, Mao Yuanheng, and Wang Jiangge, who supported us in so many ways with setting up this Zoom conference, with designing the beautiful website and administering all the registration processes. And so very many thanks to you again, and for making this run so smoothly and taking so much work off our shoulders in these past weeks. So thank you again. And with that, I would like to end the introductory remarks and give back to Sung Chen.